I'm Jay Horton. I make movies that make money without a comb, and this is Filmmakers On. Today, I'm talking to prolific filmmaker and actor Jon-Paul Gates. I've worked with Jean-Paul on a ton of documentary features. He hosted and directed several that I produced and edited, and he's acted in over like 100 films of varying budget levels. And he has a lot of great insight into independent film, both here in the US and the UK. Let's do the interview thing. What is the independent film industry like in the UK?
It tends to be fair, to be more guerrilla. And what I mean by that, because obviously we don't have the Screen Actors Guild and we don't have the Teamsters over here, that means that a lot of productions, particularly the micro budget level, tend to operate without a union. And that doesn't mean to say that it's not organized, but say, for example, actors will turn up on set, and as long as they've got a green room or a space, they don't necessarily need to have a trailer, for example. So to compare it, I mean, some of the movies I've worked on in the US, you're automatically guaranteed some sort of trailer space, whether you're sharing in that with other actors or whatever, because the unions are not strong over here. Because really, equity, in essence, it lost its power once Margaret Thatcher was a prime minister, got rid of the unions, in the 80s. What tends to happen is it tends to be, the process tends to be a lot quicker. But at the same time, the rates, whether you're cast or crew, tend to be a lot less because the unions are not, obviously they don't have that influence like they do in the US.
Right. And how is it as far as like the exhibition or distribution of the films? I've talked to a few filmmakers from the UK, and it seems like there's not quite the same opportunity there for independent release as there is here, but I could be mistaken on that.
Well, I suppose, are we talking now or are we talking 10, 15 years ago? Because you're quite right. There's certainly a lot more opportunities to release your films digitally with American platforms, but there are platforms that are opening up in Europe, and particularly, funny enough, weirdly enough, Eastern Europe. There's lots of platforms that have set up digital platforms over there, and they have relationships with Roku and Tubi and all these other channels that, obviously, I understand it, you forgive me, but Tubi is an American platform that's now going international, about to go international,
Yeah, yeah,
so.
that's what I'm hearing. Does Tubi can you watch Tubi in the UK?
Well, even though I, like yourself, I've not got as many as much content on Tubi, but I've got several on there now. Funny enough, several of my docs,
Mhm.
So, but as I understand it, you can't watch it as yet. But
Right.
that's about to change. But I don't know when that date will be. If you'd have asked that question 10 years ago, I would have quite blankly said, yes, America has more platforms, distribution channels for independent filmmakers to monetize. But now I think it's the divide is being reduced. So, but I suppose, like with anything, you can't beat those platforms in the US. You know what I mean? But that it's not as bad as it used to be. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, totally, totally. Do you think that overall, like, and this is just like an overall general, like, independent film question, do you feel like the future is bright for it, or like, do you feel a little pessimistic about it?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll answer that question twofold, both in front and behind the camera. So let's take about being in front of the camera first of all. What I found, because obviously I've been in the business 25 plus years now, when I first started, let's put it this way, one was always shooting on film, whether that be 35 or, Super 16 or standard 16. And invariably what would happen is that because it took so much time to shoot on film, your shooting weeks were a minimum of, say, 6 to 8 weeks. Whether it be a micro budget film, it would always be 6 to 8 weeks. So what's happening with video is, films are being shot in a matter of days now, not weeks, days, and I'm sure you've experienced that. What that means to the actor, not so much crew, but the actor, is that if you're paid on a day rate, you're getting, as opposed to 6 to 8 weeks work, you're getting, maybe days or maybe a week. That's the first thing. And the other thing is that because there's more distribution channels available, that means that, yes, you've got more opportunities to showcase your talent, but at the same time, those buyers are paying less per territory. So what that means is that, like, for example, the first film I did back in 1999 was a film called Cold Fish, and that was shot on Super 16. And I think the budget of that was about 350,000 UK, so about what, $500,000 US, roughly around about that time. That same film being shot on video now, you probably look at a budget of, say, 50,000 UK. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that means that, to give me my idea, I mean, I was the lead in Cold Fish, and I won't say what I got paid, but let's put it this way: I made probably 5-6 times the amount of what I'm getting paid now for a 50 grand movie. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So to answer your question, certainly in front of the camera, there's more opportunities to be seen, but you have to do more movies or more projects as an actor in order to make a living. So that so from the being in front of the camera point of view, I don't envy people that are just going into the business now, that are straight out of drama school or they're in their teens, because it's really, really difficult. But then again, the flip side of that is that because there's so much social media now, you are your own agent, because you can communicate with filmmakers both in your own indigenous country but also overseas. So there's more opportunities to be hired. So I suppose, it's a chicken and egg scenario, Jason. But I kind of feel that, I mean, I'm glad that I started when I did. If anything, I would like to start maybe 10 years before, but I don't envy those kids that are coming into the business now. So that's really the question answered on the, in front of the camera. As far as behind the camera is concerned, I mean, I think those, you'll have to excuse me because our cat Tilly is going wild. So Tilly, come here. Oh, come here. We'll say hello to Jason.
That's a Russian blue, huh?
Matilda. This is Matilda. She doesn't normally hog the camera. She's quite shy, but today, I don't know, she's kind of like, she sensed that I was getting a phone call, and as a result, she's being Miss Princess, and, my other half's trying to get, anyway, she's gone. So anyway, to answer the question about being behind the camera, I mean, obviously I'm not as experienced as you being as a filmmaker. I think from a crew perspective, if you're a DOP, I mean, DOPs, let's face it, now can buy their own equipment, and they usually get hired not to operate some equipment that the production company is hired in, but usually they're providing their own equipment. I think from that perspective, if you've got your own equipment, you've got the latest equipment, that means you're more marketable. So as a result, if you're on it, like actors should be with social media, similarly, I think, crews should be focused on getting the latest technology, because then they'll be hired as, better, more than others. From a crew perspective, I think it's competitive, but it's not as onerous as it probably is for actors coming into the profession.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I never really, I honestly didn't think of it a whole lot from an actor's perspective, and that's really true. I mean, it's tough.
Very much so, very much so. And I mean, as I say, the thing is, I suppose, Um, I'm lucky from certain respects, is because facially, even though I'm reasonably chameleon, I'm never going to play a romantic lead. I mean, I played a romantic lead in my first film called Fish, and thereafter I've been playing predominantly antagonists, as you know,
Mm.
or character parts. And now I'm getting a lot older. I think maybe I probably shouldn't say this, because I know I'll live to regret it, but hopefully there's more work out there for me.
You have been doing it for about 25 years now. Like how did you get started? Is it something you always wanted to do?
Well, funny enough, no. I think, well, I wanted to be a sportsman. I wanted to be a professional soccer player. I'll say soccer because I assume we're going after the American audience. So yeah, from the ages of say 6 to 14, I just yearned to become a professional soccer player, and I had a few trials with various professional clubs in the UK, not the likes of Manchester United, not the Premier League clubs, but the lower divisions. And I actually got signed on with Huddersfield Town and Grimsby. I played for both those intermediate teams, youngster teams. And then I got an injury to my Achilles. And back then, we're talking, 25 years plus, the medical industry wasn't that, the technology wasn't that advanced. So when I returned from my injury, it took me about a year to recover from it. I'd lost that, I don't know, I lost that spark, or my peers had obviously progressed at that age. But I was very hyperactive as a kid. I'd always be cracking jokes, as in the dressing room, and I would always be very positive about things. And I had an agent, a entertainment agent at the time, and he said to me in his infinite wisdom, "Well, you should go into entertainment, JP. You've got that. You've got it about you. You've got the gift of the gab, and why not?" So basically, what happened was I started doing some local theatre, youth theatre. My agent at the time managed to get me on this TV series in Spain called El Dorado, which was my first ever gig, which not a lot of people know about, because obviously it's only people of our age and generation in the UK that would know about it. And I was 14 and a half, 15 when I did that. Yeah, I mean, I did a year on a BBC show, and it kind of really, to be honest with you, Jason, it kind of like it. I suppose it enabled me. I had my training, because I had no real training. So I had my camera training in Spain, because I did, about 8 months on the show. And that really, I suppose, gave me some direction as to what I'm going to do after my soccer career had finished, So, and then as I say, I've been working in, as you know, I've been working in independent film, some television, not just in the UK, but internationally. And yeah, I mean, I certainly found my destiny, or whatever you'd like to call it. Each year proves to be a challenge, but you have to kind of like reinvent yourself, a little bit like Madonna does constantly as a musician, and various other artists, So
How has and we mentioned it a little bit before, but how has like finding work changed from like when you started? How did you get hired for acting gigs to now? How do you find new acting gigs?
well, I mean, it's a mixture of really your representation, and thankfully I have representation in the UK, in America, and also Eastern Europe. So it's a mixture of that. And I suppose when I first started, like with anything, there was no social media. Yeah. So you relied on really sending your CV via your agent. And we're talking not digital CVs, we're talking, the paper CV to a prospective employer, Tilly, come here, come here. Yeah, I'll be sending my paper resume via my UK agent and my US agent, and it would be a case of you'd have to do more, physical auditions. Obviously, you would be waiting for that phone call. There'd be no emails or anything like that. It'd be a phone call from the agent to say, get to this location at this time, and you'd be in a room with however many they wanted to see for that part. The way it is now, obviously, as my number of credits have accumulated, I've got better representation. So that's number one, how it's changed now. But more importantly, talking about social media, you're dead if you're not on social media. And to be honest with you, it took me a while to realize the significance of social media. So I didn't get on Facebook until 2015, which is relatively late for Facebook. And I'm kind of, I wouldn't say although one director said that I should get on Facebook, he said that he wishes he'd never introduced me to it because he says I've become a monster on it. Now, I only do maybe one post a day if I'm lucky, but I know there are certain people that do 10 to 15 posts. And what I've learned is that there's an old adage my late father said. He said, out of sight, out of mind. And it's so true.
They often say, like with any business, diversification is key. And I've noticed, besides the projects that we've done together, over the years, like you've moved a little bit behind the scenes as in addition to acting. Like how important do you think that is to, to continue to add like new skills and new ways to monetize?
I think it's incredibly important because let's face it, when I first started, you had actors that act. What I learned, especially from the States, where you had a lot of actors that also produced. If you go back to, Clint Eastwood, who's an inspiration of mine, back in the 70s when he was making all those Dirty Harry movies. And, if you see the single common denominator with all those films is that even though sometimes he wasn't directing, you'll see the name Malpaso Productions, which is his production company. And he's used that same production company. And so I believe the same crew, now he's moved from, being in front of the camera to being behind it. So I kind of took inspiration from that. And also, from a lot of actors over the years in the States that had their own shingles, production shingles. And, coming over to the States when I first met you and even before that, I was always told that it doesn't matter in Hollywood or in the US, at the end of the day, it's what's happening now, not what's happened in the past. And the only way you can be in control of your own destiny is to, if you like, create work for yourself. That became a kind of like a cornerstone of my thinking. And even before I started doing docs with you, I had actually produced, produce movies. But again, I took a back step, depending on what vehicles were available to raise finance, et cetera, et cetera. I consider myself more a casting producer. And what I mean by that is that because I've been fortunate over the years to work with a lot of American actors and European actors, they've become, thankfully, good friends of mine. So if a filmmaker wanted to use one of them, I could make a potential call to that artist to see, if in principle they'd be interested. And rather than the filmmaker spending a protracted process of going through their manager and their agent and their other forms of representation and getting completely, bamboozled with it, I can kind of go direct and, see if that's a possibility. So I see myself more doing that than the general nuts and bolts producer. Although, obviously on our docs we've done and other things I've production managed. That's something that I recognize the importance of it. And I dip in and out depending on how busy I am as an actor. I mean, if you recall, I mean, just tell your audience, I mean, it was you really, to be honest with you, got me into documentaries, because when we had that meeting in the US and you said, well, have you considered this as downtime to when you're not, performing?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like, yeah, and I kind of embraced it, and even though my output on documentaries has not been as significant as when we were working together, I'm still doing it. It's just that I've been busy as an actor, so it's very difficult to, fit it in. But,
Right.
at the end of the day, I mean, my view is that, a filmmaker can be an actor, can be a director, can be a producer. It depends on the way in which you define a filmmaker,
I gotta ask, do you have any ambition to direct like narrative stuff? Is that something you've ever thought about?
Do you know what? I mean, it's funny. It's funny you should say that. I don't know whether I would make a good narrative director, and I'll explain why.
Hmm.
I think because I'm so into, so for example, I'm very method in the way in which I work as an actor. I will do a hell of a lot of research into that character to bring something more to, when I'm on set. So I love improvisation. I love to bring something that the director or the writer may not have thought about. And I'll say, look, can we try it this way? And, 9 times out of 10, they'll say, yeah, okay. Whether it works or not is a different ballgame. Anyway, let me explain what I'm trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
So because I'm very focused as an actor, I find that if I was working as a director, and let's say an actor wasn't getting it, I don't know whether I have the capacity, to nurture that actor to get where I want that person to be. I think I can tell a story, but I don't know whether I'd be able to manage all the elements without completely exploding if it's not going my way. And what I've seen of various filmmakers, the way they've managed to hold it together. I mean, I watched a documentary on Steven Spielberg's Jaws, right? And I thought to myself, that went well over budget. It went well over schedule. I mean, we're talking like 3 times over schedule. And how he was able to handle the abuse and the pressure from the studio saying you're fired or whatever, I don't know if I could handle that. I'm one of these people, if somebody says something to me, I have to react. So do you know what I mean?
Mm.
So I don't know when I could hold it in. And I think to be a good director, you've got to be a good manager of people, whether that be in front or behind. And I don't know whether, I probably would have to have somebody with me to communicate, because if somebody didn't do what I was saying, I would lose it. You know what I mean? And do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
I do.
whereas with docs, what I like about them, the other thing is what I like about docs is that pretty much it's factual stuff. So you don't get criticized.
Right.
And what I mean by that, I mean, you do get criticized because, I mean, especially with people who are, for want of a better word, they're in the industry and they're making those kind of those docs, then fair enough. But I find that with narrative fictional stuff, because it's your interpretation of it, and quite rightly, everybody has their own opinion. But what I hate is when that person who's proffering the opinion hasn't done anything in the business.
Right.
So I think at the moment, I would probably just stick to directing factual stuff. I don't mind producing fictional stuff. And hopefully I'll still continue working as an actor. But at the moment, I'm kind of like, as I say, just for the reasons aforementioned, I think that I don't yet have the skill set to manage people and nurture performances and And really, you need that.
So I was just glancing at your IMDb, and I'm seeing something like 117 credits, and I'd assume there's a bunch that already been on there. So what have been some common, like, without calling anybody out or naming any names, what are some common, like, production mistakes that you see made, like, over and over on independent sets?
I mean, I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that if you throw money at something, they think that will solve the problem. Doesn't automatically work that way, because throwing money presents its own problem, because in essence, people see the money as opposed to the creative endeavor. So it's juxtaposing financial reward with what we all try and do is to create a piece of art, in essence. So I think that's one of the biggest things I've found, where you've been on a production, it's run out of money, and sometimes by scraping through, you get a better creative result than you do necessarily by just chucking money at it. What tends to happen is that filmmakers plan, and then they get the money, and then they have to scramble to make the production. Sometimes it's not enough money, so they're forever. So for example, you might get enough money to shoot 2 weeks, and it's a 4-week shoot, and some filmmakers go ahead and shoot it, and then they don't get the rest of the money, or they get the rest of the money at a time when all the cast and crew are on other productions. Yeah. So you got to make sure you get all your money up front, your budget. But again, if there's a time limit on that investment, then it's a very difficult call to make. What I don't like, and I'm seeing a lot of this at the moment, and not naming any names, but what I don't like is that, because there's so many channels and obviously budgets are being pushed down further and further, I don't like when filmmakers think they can pay the crew, but they don't want to pay the actors, or they want to pay the actors a lot less. I don't like that, because at the end of the day, you see, my view about filmmaking is this: is that if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, or indeed you get the what's the word here? You get the perception of that. So what I mean by that is this: is that you always make an offer to pay somebody something. I don't like it when people say, "Oh, well, this is IMDb credit and expenses and blah 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 blah." But the problem is there are so many young actors that are coming out, and this is what I'm saying to you, that don't know any better, that will do it. I have my set rate, my daily rate. And yeah, okay, if I want to work with that filmmaker, or I've worked with that filmmaker before and had a good experience, then yeah, I'll do a deal. My agent will do a deal. But I haven't worked for free for 18 years, 19 years. And what I mean by free is, some of those productions, I did what's called a deferred payment deal, where you get paid, later down the road. And of course, that's the worst thing you can do, because you're never going to see anything. You're never going to see anything.
Have you ever, in the course of your career, been made whole by one of the deferments? Like, over the
Yes.
course of the entire? Okay, I was just asking, because you're one of the only people I know.
Yeah. Well, there's, it's like, sometimes you have to manage your own expectations, and also manage things. There was a film I did, and it was a Bollywood film shooting over here, and they asked me. Funny enough, this is a weird thing, but they asked me to bring another actor on board, so I did, because they were an Indian production company. But of course, they were an Indian production company. They were based in Mumbai, so we did the scene. And they said, okay, no worries, we'll be in touch with your agent, to pay you the money. And that wasn't the agreement. The agreement was they were going to pay me cash on the day. And also, I've got another actor that I've recommended and brought on board. So basically, I had to get a little bit heavy. And I said to the guy, I said, listen, no, we're not having any of that. I said, I'm going to walk you down to that cash point. and you are going to draw that money out. Yeah. And I wasn't messing, so he did. And, as I say, it was just, a couple of days I did on it, but otherwise, Jason, I would not have seen the money. I kid you not, I would not have seen it. And that's not being disparaging to the Asian community, filmmaking community. It's just that, when you're dealing with a company that's not based in, what then you need to make sure that you get paid. It's bad enough sometimes getting money out of people who are respected, never mind about, so yeah, I think you've got to kind of like, you've got to be streetwise, and that's just my take on it. But look, I mean, as I say, I've had a creatively, I've been fulfilled with the amount of credits. It's just like with anything, I would like to have made a little bit more money out of the business. You know what I mean?
This one's, it might get a little heavy, but I've been asking people this recently because as I get older, this has been, coming up in my mind a lot. Do you ever regret like you going professionally into like filmmaking as opposed to seeking out a more stable profession, like a more traditional profession?
A simple answer to that question, no. And the reason being, I've done, I've done other jobs. I've done all sorts of jobs. I mean, to give you an idea, I did a telesales job, and I was actually pretty good at it, but I hated it with a vengeance. And to be honest with you, I was making money from doing it, and that was the only motivation, because I thought to myself, well, okay, I could maybe potentially finance a project or get involved in a project with the money that I'd made. Yeah. But believe you me, I could not stand the 9-to-5 regime. I like to be my own boss. And unfortunately, when you're getting a salary, which I was, I was getting a salary and a commission. I just couldn't handle being told what to do. It's different when you're being, when you're on a movie set and you're playing a character, and let's say, for example, you're not quite hitting the director's vision. It's different, that's different. As I say, I just couldn't handle the 9-to-5 monotony. And also, the other thing is as well is that, and this is not to disparage people who work 9-to-5, but I just find that the opportunity to progress is extremely limited. It doesn't matter how talented you are within that particular field, it's extremely limited, because it will always, the people at the top will always progress themselves, either financially or, career-wise, no, absolutely not. Now, however, if you ask me, do I regret not being a professional soccer player? Then I would say, I mean, certainly if I was doing it now, yeah, because the money for professional soccer players is just exorbitant. I mean, some of the Premiership players are getting now £200,000 per week.
Oof.
Okay, yeah, and Ronaldo's just signed for Manchester United. He's getting paid £510,000 per week, which is what, about $100,000 a week, something like that. Right. So I think if I had a choice now between football and acting, I think I probably would go for football based on the financial elements. But yeah, if you compare it with working 9-to-5, no, I mean, I love what I do. And yeah, we know that as actors, we get a lot of unemployment. But, at the end of the day, as I say, it's not like it was 25 years ago where you were just relying on that phone call. Now you can really be, I suppose, the creator of your own destiny.
So, and then this one's kind of hard sometimes for people to answer that have been at it for a long time, because, when you started is not necessarily relevant to, how someone would start today. But what is some advice you would give to younger actors who are just getting going?
I suppose the standard answer to that, and it still really applies even today is only do it if you really want to do it. That's the first thing. I mean, the thing is that now with technology and social media, sometimes you can come at the business from all different angles. So there's a lot of people coming into the business now that have been reality stars, that have turned to be actors, and sometimes that works. I think I'm not really a great believer in drama school, because I think, like with anything, acting is really all about life experience, and you can't draw on things if you've not experienced them. Doesn't matter what they tell you in drama school. Life experience, and get as much experience as you can on a film set or a TV set. And the great thing is, what people must do is be nice. It's really, really important, because I've met a lot of talented people in the business, and you kind of think that, well, where are they? They've not had the longevity. I mean, some people have, changed their circumstances. They've had families and decided that they, wanted to go into the 9 to 5 thing for financial security. Yeah. But there's been other people that have kind of like dissipated and left the business, probably because of their attitude. And you're a filmmaker, who's done a lot of fictional narrative stuff. And what you don't want to have is you have an actor that turns up, and they might be very good, but if they're a pain in the ass, the thing about a filmmaker is that they spend so much time getting the project off the ground, that the filmmaking should be like the honeymoon kind of period. You know what I mean? And if you've got an actor or an actor person that's an asshole, you kind of think to yourself, well, hang on a minute, I'm creating an opportunity for you to showcase your talents, but I'm not enjoying the process. So and I think that's really, really important. The first film I did, I worked with an actor who's been around a long time, and I watched him, and this guy, he was equally as nice to the runner as he was the director. And I thought, that's interesting. And I thought to myself, even at that tender age of, I don't know how old I was, 17, 18 or 18, 19. And I said to myself, the fact that he's been around a long time, it just shows you his respect. And, because it's Disraeli's quote, top of the greasy pole. He was a British prime minister in the 19th century. And what he meant by that is that, you see lots of weird things in this business. And if you've been an asshole to that person who was a runner like 20 years ago, now he's like a studio exec at, Amazon or Netflix. I'll say them now, because let's face it, they're becoming the new studios, so then they remember, and then they think, nah, so it's be professional, yeah, but also be genuine and have fun. That's the other thing. You've got to have fun. If you don't have fun, don't do it.